Good morning, guys. In the last session, we started our discussion related to Spring security. So Spring framework provided security module to secure our applications. Spring framework provided security module. Spring framework provided security module to secure our applications. In order to secure our applications, in order to secure our applications, we need to add the starter, Spring Boot starter security. By default, it will secure all the endpoints of our application. Right. Yesterday we created a project. In that project, we have added one REST controller. I created one project. In that project, I have added boot starter security dependency, and I have added web starter. So whenever we add boot starter security dependency, by default, it is going to secure all the endpoints of our application. So by default, it is going to take default username and password. Default username will be user and password will be printed on the console. If you don't want to use the default credentials, then we will go for application.properties. So here I'm configuring my username and password to secure our application. So this is a HTTP basic authentication concept. So this is HTTP basic authentication concept in order to secure our applications. Now I'm writing one application. This is my REST API. In this REST API, we are using Spring Security. In this REST API, we are using Spring Security. So when we use this Spring Security in the REST API, that will provide by default basic authentication. What kind of security it is? This is HTTP basic auth. HTTP basic auth. For this HTTP basic auth, we are configuring username and password. So this username I configured as a admin, password I configured as admin @123. So where we configured this username and password for the basic authentication. So by default, whenever we add the security starter in the pom.xml, it will add basic authentication for our application. So for basic authentication, if you don't give the credentials, then it is going to take the default credentials. It is going to take the default credentials. All right. So what are those default credentials? The default credentials will be user and password will be printed on the console. So if you don't want to use that, then we will go for this user defined credentials. I'm configuring user.name and I'm configuring user.password. Okay, let us run this application. Run as boot application. Run as boot application. So in my application, security starter is available. In my application, security starter is available. All right, let us try to access this application in the browser. Localhost colon 8080. Now you see, when I access this application from the browser, it is asking me to log in. Okay, so when I access this application from the browser, it is asking me to log in. Now I can access this REST API from Postman also. So from browser, if I am trying to access this application, it is asking me to log in. I can access from the Postman also, and I can access this REST API from client application also. I can access this REST API from the client application also. So a browser can access this REST API. From browser, I want to access this REST API. From the postman also, I want to access this REST API. And from client application also, I want to access this REST API. So this REST API is secured by default with the Spring Security. This REST API is secured by default with the Spring Security. HTTP basic auth, username is admin, password is admin@123. So these credentials I have configured in my application at properties. Now my application is running. So when this application is running, if I try to access this application from the browser, it is asking me to log in with a username and password. I need to send a username and password to this application. Then only it will process my request. If I give invalid username password, it is giving bad credentials. If I give username and password, it is giving me bad credentials. Getting my point? It is giving me bad credentials. Clear? If I give correct username and password, admin, admin@123. If I sign in, now I am getting the response as welcome to Ashok IT. Now I am getting the response as welcome to Ashok IT. That means I'm able to access it. Next one, let us go to Postman. So same application, if we want to access from the Postman, then we need to send the credentials in the request as a header. We need to send the credentials in the request as a header. Now, so if you see authorize get request localhost colon 8080. So I am not passing any headers. If I click on send, I'm getting 401 unauthorized. So when I send this request, I'm getting the response as 401 unauthorized. I'm getting the response as 401 unauthorized. So what is the meaning of that? We are unable to access the REST API. We are unable to access the REST API because that REST API got secured. Because that REST API got secured. What security is there? Basic authentication security is available. HTTP basic auth security is available in the REST API. Now, if I want to access this request, if I want to process this request in the Postman, I need to send the header. So one HTTP header I need to send. So what is the format of the HTTP header? Authorization is the key and some value will be available. Authorization, see here, select the authorization tab, type basic auth. What kind of authentication available for our REST API? Whenever we add Spring Security, it is providing basic authentication. So you need to select your authentication type as a basic auth. When you select the authentication type as a basic auth, username and password. Username is admin, password is admin123. So that is the username and password used in the REST API with the basic authentication security. So now here I'm selecting authentication type as a basic auth, then username is admin, password is admin@123. Then I will give update request. Click on update request. When I click on update request, you observe authorization header key. Authorization is the key, header value. So how this key and value will be prepared, it is going to take authorization as a key and value basic basic encode username colon password. So this is the value. Username colon password will be available. That username and password will be encoded using base 64 algorithm. It is going to encode our username and password by using base 64 algorithm, and it is going to append basic as a text, basic space encode this username and password. Authorization is the header, basic space encode username colon password. Okay, so like this, postman is preparing the header and it is going to send that header to the REST API. Authorization is the key, basic space encode username and password. So we are going to send this header to the REST API. Now see this header, authorization is the key, value it is a basic space encoded username and password. Click on send. Now we are able to access the REST API. So the REST API is having a security. What security is available in the REST API? Is it a OAuth? Is it a JWT? Or is it a basic auth security? What security is available in the REST API, guys? What security is available in the REST API? What security is available in the REST API? What security is available in the REST API now? So the security that we have is a basic authentication. Basic authentication. For the basic authentication, credentials are available. What are the credentials available here? Username and password credentials are available. So where I configure the username and password for my REST API security, for my REST API security, I configure the username and password in the application.properties file. So if anybody trying to access this application from browser, it is opening a login page, default login page. If you provide the username and password, then browser will send that data to the REST API. If the given credentials are valid, your request will be processed. If the given credentials are valid, your request will be processed. Suppose if you want to access the secured REST API from the postman, then you need to send a header. What is the header? HTTP header you need to send. How to send the HTTP header? Authorization is the header key, basic space encode username and password. This is the value. This is the key and this is the value. So from the postman, we are sending this key and value to the REST API in the request. With that, if that header key and value is valid, that means that REST API will take this username and password which is in the encoded, it is going to decode and it is going to compare the given username and password is correct or not. If the given username and password is correct, then it is going to process the request. It is going to process the request. That is fine. Are you able to understand how to secure our REST API using basic authentication? Just we added one Spring Starter security starter and we configure the credentials in the properties file. We are able to access it from the browser and we are able to access it from the postman. Can we develop one client application? REST client can we develop and can we see our REST client can access this REST API or not? Guys, can we develop one REST client? Can we try? Is that REST client application able to access our secured REST API or not? Yes or no? Can we develop one REST client and can we check is our REST client able to access our REST API or not? Yes. Let's try this. Now, REST API is ready. That REST API is having a security. REST API is ready. That REST API is having a security. Now, file, new, starter project. File, new, starter project. So this is my 58 application. Spring Boot security client app. Next. I'm going to select a web starter. I'm going to select web starter, dev tools. Do I need to add the security dependency here? In the client application, do I need the security dependency? No. Client is just a REST client to send the request to REST API. I don't need any security dependency. So I'm selecting only web starter and dev. I'm using only web starter and dev tools. Click on next, click on finish. Click on next and click on finish. Perfect. Now my client application is getting created. Okay. New class, new class, welcome service. I'm creating one service class. Service class is used to write the business logic. I want to represent this class as a Spring Bean. For that, I'm using @service annotation. For this, I'm using @service annotation. All right. Welcome service I have taken. In this welcome service, I'm going to write the logic to access welcome API. Public void invoke welcome API. String API URL. API is running in the local machine only. http://localhost:8080. Can I say this is my API URL? Can I say this is my API URL? Yes, this is my API URL. So one application want to access another application. Guys, how one application can access another application? What is the mediator? HTTP protocol. So we have one REST API already running in the system. That REST API running on the port number 8080. We have one REST API running in my system. That REST API running on the port number 8080. Now I have created one application as a client application. Now my client application want to send a request to API application. One application acting as a client, another application acting as a API resource. So how can we send the request from one application to another application in the Spring Boot? Guys, can you tell me how can we send the request from one application to another application? How can we send the request from one application to another application? HTTP request. How many ways are there to send the HTTP request from one application to another application? One is by using REST template. Second one is by using web client. One is by using REST template and the second one is by using web client. Are you clear with this? REST template and web client. So let me create the REST template first. Let me create the REST template first. REST template RT is equal to new REST template. REST template RT is equal to new REST template. I created the object for REST template. REST template class will follow builder design pattern. REST template will follow builder design pattern. So I created the object for REST template. Now REST template dot get for entity. So I am giving API URL. API is giving string response. So I'm specifying string dot class. I'm specifying string dot class. So I got the response entity. Response entity dot get body. Whatever the response body we are getting from the API, I'm storing that body into a variable and I am printing that body. Can I say this is my client logic which is used to access REST API? Guys, can I say this is my client logic which is used to access the REST API? Can I say this is a client logic which is used to access our REST API? Come on. I'm taking the API URL. I'm creating object for REST template. REST template dot get for entity. I am passing the API URL. I am passing the API URL. I'm telling to store that response into the string variable. Now, response entity dot get body. I'm getting the body. System dot out dot println of body. I'm printing that body. So this is my service class. Can I call this service class from the start class? Can I call the service class method from the start class? Run dot get bean. What is that bean? Welcome service dot class. Welcome service dot class. Okay. Now we got this bean object. Bean dot invoke welcome API. Bean dot invoke welcome API. Now, what will be the default port number? 8080. Already my API running on 8080. So can I run the other application with the same port number, or I need to change the port number? Guys, can I run other application on the same port number, or I need to change the port number? Can I run other application on the same port number, or I need to change the port number? I need to change the port number. So can you tell me how to change the port number? Can you tell me how to change the port number? Come on. How to change the port number? Server dot port. Server dot port is equal to 9090. Now, API running on which port number? Client is running on which port number? API is running on which port number? Client is running on which port number? Guys, API running on which port number and client is running on which port number? API is running on which port number and client is running on which port number? API is running on the port number 8080. Client is running on the port number 9090. Okay, let's run our client application. In the client start class, directly I am calling service method. Service method, service method is trying to access REST API. Service method is trying to access the REST API. Right. Run this project, run as boot application. Guys, now when I execute it, am I getting the response or I am getting the login page? When I access the REST API giving the response or REST API giving the response as a login page? Come on. What is the response I am getting? What is the response I am getting? Login page. Why I am getting login page? Why I am getting the login page? Why I am getting the login page? Come on, guys. Why I'm getting the login page? So whatever the API we are trying to access, that API is a normal API, that API is a secured API. The API that we are accessing, is that API is a normal API, that API is a secured API, that API is a secured API. So when that API is a secured, can you directly access like this? When that API is secured, can we directly access like this? Can we directly access like this? Come on. We cannot. We cannot. What should I do to access that API now? What should I do to access that API now? Guys, come on. What should I do to access that API now? We need to send the credentials. We need to send the credentials. Where I need to send the credentials? Basic auth credentials I have to send. Credentials I need to send in the header. Credentials I need to send in the body. Credentials I need to send in the header, or I need to send in the body. We need to send the credentials in the header, not in the body. Now, how to send those credentials? To send the credentials to the REST template, there is a class called HTTP headers. What is the class available? HTTP headers class is available. HTTP headers is equal to new HTTP headers. Headers dot set basic auth credentials. Set basic auth credentials. What is the credentials? Username is the admin. Password is admin@123. Understood? In order to access that REST API, first thing we need to understand that is not a normal REST API, that is a secured REST API. What kind of security available for the REST API? For that REST API, we have basic authentication. For that REST API, we are having basic authentication. Basic authentication we have username and password available. Now client application is there. We have one application. This client application want to access that secured REST API. For that we are sending username and password. The username and password we need to send in the header. How to send the data in the header? By using REST template. There is a class called HTTP headers. We created the object for HTTP headers. HTTP headers dot set basic auth. Username is admin. Password is admin@123. Username is admin. Password is admin@123. Okay. Now here I am calling get for entity method. By using get for entity, can we send the headers or we cannot send the headers? So if you see the parameters of the get for entity, is there any method available? Is there any method available to send the headers, or there is no method available to send the headers? Do we have the method to send the headers by using get for entity? By using get for entity, can I send the headers? No, it is not possible. Then what should I do? I need to create one more object called HTTP entity. I need to create one more object called HTTP entity. Okay, of string entity, request entity. We will call this as a request entity is equal to new HTTP entity. For the constructor, I will pass a headers. Okay, I created HTTP headers object. For this HTTP headers object, I'm setting basic auth credentials. I'm setting basic auth credentials. This HTTP headers I am passing as a parameter to HTTP entity object. Now I have request entity. How to send the request using this request entity which contains the headers? That's where we have a method called exchange method. What is the method we have, guys? Exchange method. See, what are the parameters available for exchange method? What are the parameters we have for exchange method? We have URL, we have method, we have request entity, we have response entity. So URL, already we have a variable API URL. What request we need to send? We need to send get request, HTTP method dot get. Request entity, we are going to set request entity. Response type, what response type we are getting? String dot class. String dot class, which is going to give us the response entity. Which is going to give us the response entity. This response entity I will comment now. This response entity, I will comment now. See, here I'm creating headers object and I'm setting basic auth credentials in the header. With the headers, I'm creating entity object. Entity object I am passing as a parameter to exchange method. So exchange is a generic method in the REST template. By using this exchange method, you can send any type of request. By using this exchange, you can send any type of request. If you go for get for entity, that means it is specific to only get request. Post for entity, specific to only post request. Here I'm using exchange. Exchange method can be used to send any type of request. Exchange method is used to send any type of request. So this first parameter is my URL, second parameter is my method, third parameter is my request object, fourth parameter is the response type. Now see, whenever we develop this application, my client application 58 application is a client application, Maven update project, force update. Maven update the project as a force update. So let us see here. Let us see here. Application. Let's run this. Run as boot application. Run as boot application. So are we able to get the result from the API? Are we able to get the result from the API? So earlier we got the login page as a response. Now we are getting the result. Why we are getting the result now? Why we are getting the result now? Come on. 5 minutes back, we got the login page as a response. Now we are getting the actual response. What is the difference between that program and this program? Last time, we have not sent basic auth credentials in the request. Now we are sending basic auth credentials in the request. So when the REST API is secured with the basic auth, if you don't send the credentials, you will get a login page. If you send the credentials correctly, then you will get the actual response. Are we able to get the actual response now? Are we are able to get the actual response? So which approach we are following to send the request? Are we using REST template? Are we are using web client? Are we using REST template? Are we are using web client? We are using REST template. But REST template is the recommended approach to develop the REST client, or web client is the recommended approach to develop the web clients? Web client is REST template is recommended to develop the REST client. Web client is recommended to develop the REST client. Currently in the market, which one is recommended? Web client is recommended. Okay, fine. So can we develop a client? Can we develop the same logic, REST client logic by using web client? Can we develop the same logic by using web client? Come on. Yes. Before going to develop the web client for this REST API, are you clear with this code? Whatever the code I have written, are you clear? How I am sending basic auth credentials in the header? Are you clear with this? How I am sending basic auth credentials in the header? Clear? Perfect. Somebody asking what is header? Superman. At the end of the course, you are asking very good question. What is header? I have taken one complete session to explain you what is header, what is body, what is request structure, what is response structure. All right. Now, guys, in order to develop, in order to develop a client using web client, which starter we need to use? Guys, in order to develop a client, which starter we need to use for web client? For web client, which starter we need to use? Web starter is sufficient. Web starter is not sufficient. Web starter sufficient. Web starter not sufficient. Not sufficient. Which starter we need to use for this? We need to use Webflux. If you want to use web client, if you want to use web client in the project, then we need to use starter Webflux. We need to use a starter Webflux. I have added that. Now go to our application. Now I am going to write one more method. This method is used with REST template. This method is used with REST template. Now I will create another method. Public void invoke welcome. Public void invoke welcome. We know already our API URL. API URL. Let me create the outside of the class. Yeah, I am creating one variable at the class level. This is my instance variable. Those instance variables we can access in all the methods. Now, this is REST template logic. Now, here I want to write the logic of web client. Guys, tell me, web client is a class or web client is a interface? Web client is a class or web client is a interface? Web client is a class or web client is a interface? Web client is a interface. Web client is a interface. ठीक है? चलो. Now I want to use web client to send the request to the REST API, which is secured with the basic auth. I want to send the request to the REST API, which is secured using basic auth. Right. Now let's write the logic. Web client is an interface. Web client dot create. Web client dot create. Right. Web client dot create. We are going to get the web client implementation object. We cannot create the object directly by using new operator because it is an interface. REST template is a class. That's why we are able to create the object by using new operator. REST template is a class. We are able to create the object by using new operator. Whereas web client is an interface. We cannot create the object by using new operator. That's why I'm using web client dot create method. Create is a factory method which will return the instance of the web client. What is the meaning of instance of the web client? It is going to return the implementation class object of the web client. So once we got the implementation object, once we got the implementation of the web client, then let us write the logic to make a request to our REST API. Client dot what request we need to send, guys? API is binded to what request? Get request. API is expecting what request? Get request. Fine. Get request dot URI. We have API URL. We have API URL dot retrieve dot body to mono string dot class dot body to mono string dot class dot retrieve dot body to mono then dot block, dot block. We already discussed about this. What is the purpose of dot get? What is the purpose of dot get? Come on, guys. What is the purpose of dot get? Can I say dot get is used to send the get request? Can I say dot get is used to send the get request? It is used to send the get request. What is the purpose of dot URI? What is the purpose of dot URI? Come on. To which API you want to send a request, that we are specifying by using dot URI. What is the dot retrieve? Whatever the response coming from the API, I want to retrieve the response from the response body. I want to retrieve the response from the response body. All right. I want to retrieve the response from the response body. What is the body to mono? What is the body to mono? Whatever the response we got from the REST API, let's bind that response to string type variable dot block. What is the meaning of dot block? Guys, what is the meaning of dot block now? Please respond. What is the meaning of dot block method? Making the web client as a synchronous. That means we are going to wait for the response. We are going to wait for the response. System.out.println block. Invoke welcome. Go to start class. Bean dot invoke welcome. Bean dot invoke welcome. Okay. First, let me run my API. First, I'm running my API. API is running on the port number 8080. It is asking username and password when I log in. Admin @123. API giving the response. Perfect. Now we have client application now. Client application start class calling service layer method. Service layer method contains a web client. Web client is trying to access the REST API. So this client logic will success to access the REST API, or this client logic will fail to access the REST API. Guys, this client logic will success to access the REST API, or this client logic will fail to access the REST API. This client logic will success, or this client logic will fail. This client logic will success or will fail. Let's try. Run the client application. Run the client application. REST API running on the port number 8080. Client is running on the port number 9090. In the client application, I have web client. Web client is used to access the REST API. So web client logic got success. Web client logic got failed. Web client logic got success. Web client logic got failed. Web client logic got failed. What is the error code we got? 401. What is the error code we got? 401. Why this logic got failed? Come on, guys. Why this logic got failed? Can you tell me? Why this logic got failed? Can you tell me? Web client is trying to access a normal API. Web client is trying to access a secured API. Web client is accessing a normal API, or web client is trying to access a secured API. Secured API. So is it sending the credentials? Is it sending the credentials to access that API? No. So without sending the credentials, can we access that API? Without sending the credentials, can we access that API? We cannot. So now we need to send the credentials. How to send the credentials? In the header. Now see, dot dot header dot headers. I'm going to specify dot headers. Inside the headers, I'm going to set headers dot set basic auth username and password. So what is my username? Admin. What is my password? Which given by API team? Admin at the rate 123. Admin at the rate 123. So earlier this line is not available. We are not sending the credentials. Now we are sending the credentials in the header because that REST API is secured by using basic auth. So in order to access that REST API, I'm sending the credentials in the header. How I am sending? Basic auth admin comma admin at the rate 123. Similarly, here also we set the basic auth credentials. For REST template also we are setting basic auth credentials. For web client also we are setting basic auth credentials. All right. Now stop our. Are we able to get the response? This time now run the client application. Run the client application again. Now client application trying to access the REST API. Are we getting the response from the REST API? Is my web client able to access the REST API? Come on. Yes or no? Earlier, it was not able to. Earlier, it was not able to access. Now, it is able to access. Earlier, it is not able to access. Now, it is able to access. Clear? Perfect. So, this is the logic to access secured REST API by using REST template. This is the logic to access secure REST API using web client. What is the reason behind making web client as an interface? So the reason behind making web client as an interface for loosely coupling. Internally, they can use any implementation. Guys, I'm giving this complete welcome service. In this welcome service, we have two methods. One is invoke welcome API, invoke welcome. So this second method is using web client. First method is using REST template. Clear for all of you? Clear for all of you? Guys, if you see yesterday in the Telegram, I have shared some video links which are very helpful for you. Did you get the video links? Actuators, we already discussed in the class. Profiles video, security video, MongoDB videos, JUnit 5, Docker, Kafka, AWS deployment, notes also, examples also available in the GitHub repository. Do I need to discuss these topics in the class again, or I can discuss a new topic in the Monday session? Guys, do I need to discuss the same topics again, or you can go with these videos? New topic, huh? Only one person is responding. What about the remaining people? Should I discuss the same topics again, or I need to go for new topic? New topic. Okay. So I will explain OAuth security in the Monday session, guys. I will explain OAuth security in the Monday session. All right. For OAuth, there is no video. For JWT, I have given the video. For OAuth, it is not there. These videos are permanently available. These videos are available in YouTube only. So these videos will not be deleted. These videos will not be deleted. These videos will be available permanently. In the Monday session, I will explain OAuth. All right. Thank you.